Hey, welcome back to the Good Mother, Bad Woman podcast. Well, we know how to be good mothers, but we might be bad women for different reasons. I'm your host, Stacia Caprice, happy single mom of 3 girls by 3 different dads. The Lord bless you with the nanny, and all of us get along just fine, okay? So happy today to have my first guest on the YouTube version of the podcast, my friend, Princess Castleberry. I'm going to introduce you to her and tell you about what we're talking about today. We're just going to get into it for the moms, okay? My girl, Princess Castleberry, she's a global speaker with more than 2 decades of enterprise risk management and wellness expertise. She helps leaders think like risk managers to better protect their people, purpose, and profits, which is super dope. You can listen to her TEDx talk on YouTube, where she teaches people like you and I, right, how to break bad agreements, which is what we're going to talk about today. Today, we get the privilege of talking to Princess not only as an expert, but as a mom, as a divorced woman, single woman, remarried mom, all the things, right, to discuss how the good mothers and the bad women can break bad agreements. Welcome, Princess Castleberry.
Thank you, Stacia. How you doing, honey?
Girl, good. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you could be with us. I do want to share with the people that you are officially a graduate of the Goldman Sachs 1 Million Black Women Black in Business. Did I say that right?
You did say that right. It's a long title, but yeah, Black in Business, 1 million Black women. It was an extraordinary program. We just had our graduation, and
Yes.
I am still, if I'm smiling from ear to ear, that's why, I'm just on cloud nine. I've never experienced something that was so intentional.
Yeah.
The program from start to finish, its design was by, for, and for the acceleration of Black women. So
That's
it
so
was
beautiful. And tell me
extraordinary.
again, was it a grant program or not necessarily?
Not necessarily. This was a program that was designed by Goldman Sachs to really accelerate Black women in business, right? Because they understand, the sheer numbers of it. They understand our intellect and our creative force and our ability to really shape the U.S. and world economy, right? And so,
Absolutely.
as being Goldman Sachs, they're obviously the most significant player in the financial services sector, and they understand good investments and good deals, and they believe that Black women are a great investment. And so
Absolutely.
the program is really designed to take entrepreneurs in those earlier stages in their business, and some that have been in business for a while, but really help us to accelerate those businesses so that we can grow and hire people and actually scale, not just be solopreneurs, move from solopreneur
Right.
to entrepreneur, founder to real CEO. So we learned a whole host of skills like how to position ourselves,
Mm.
coming up with our value propositions, our core processes in the business, and really created an action plan that we're going to be following for the next 12 months plus
Yeah.
to get that growth that we're all looking for.
No, that's super dope. And it's so funny. I started my career, as a salesperson. And one of
Yeah.
the things they used to tell us all the time is that you can't be one type of person and a different type of salesperson, right? This is
Right.
your life.
Done it all the way through.
Is this who you are? And so to hear you say, it's important to move from that solopreneur to this kind of leader of a team, girl, that is so relevant in our personal lives, right? As mothers and wives, we don't have to do it all by ourselves. You know what I
That's
mean?
the most important team you're
Well,
going to lead, that family, that family.
yes.
There's no team like it.
You know what I mean? And teach people how to treat you. So that is phenomenal. Congratulations to you. That is so
So
dope.
much.
I'm so glad to have you on. I obviously been following your business kind of taking off since your TEDx talk, and I'm so glad to have you on the channel and kicking it off with us. Today, if you could just kind of tell us a little bit about like your concept of breaking bad agreements, right? I know you did the TEDx talk about that. Today, we want to talk about, how we can break bad agreements, but I'm gonna let you first kind of just explain the concept.
Yeah, so first off, I have to give the biggest shout out to my partner, developer in Breaking Bad Agreements, Shantae Hooks. She is a mindfulness and meditation expert. She's just dope all around.
Yes.
But she and I were talking about a book that we love called The Four Agreements. It's by a Mexican author
Yes.
named Don Miguel Ruiz, a phenomenal book. And so this as we were discussing it, I'm a risk manager. Shantae is a risk manager, honestly, in her own right. as a former sales lead at Synchrony Bank. But Shantae and I were talking about this concept of agreements, and we raised the question, do we have bad agreements, right? So the whole
Yes.
concept of an agreement is that we have these familial and societal rules that we're born into, that we live by, that govern everything about our existence. Like your first name is
Stacia.
Stacia.
Hmm.
And so you weren't born and just, learn to talk and say, hey, I'm Stacia. Somebody called you Stacia. Somebody called you Stacia. They told you were a little girl. They said one day you'd be a woman, and they gave you a whole set and litany of rules on what it meant to be Stacia, what it meant to be a girl, whatever, your surname, your family name, what it meant to be a maze woman,
Right,
all these
exactly.
things that we're born into, right? Those things become our agreements, our language, the culture that we inherit, the way we move, and everything that we do are our agreements. And so this whole concept is that some of the agreements that we've just simply said yes to over time and started to teach and put out in the world just really don't serve us well. And
Thank you.
if nothing else, before you can break them, they require that you at least pause to define what they are, define them, and then you analyze them and say, okay, how are these agreements serving me today? How are they impacting my life? How do they govern how I show up, my mindset, how I see myself, how I see and relate to other people? And then if you discover that you have agreements that just do not serve you well, and that could be periodic and episodic too, but think long term. If you have come to a point in your life where the agreements that you hold do not serve you well, it is time to reframe them, not just break them,
Yeah.
but really intentionally reframe them and embark on a new journey for yourself. So it's DARE, dare. You dare for yourselves.
Yeah.
You dare for yourselves. And that's the most important part, that you define, analyze, reframe, and embark. And then when you find yourself in a position of power and privilege, like a mother is, right?
Like, bring it back to
Then,
the moms.
then you have to care for others. And when you care for other people, you challenge what you know about them. You accept those people for who they are in the stage and season that they're in. You again have to reframe your thinking toward them, and then you empathize to help them along their journey. But let's put care aside, honestly, for this conversation. Let's focus on just daring first,
Yeah.
finding what our agreements are, and then deciding if they're bad or not for us.
No, that is so beautiful. I love how you summarize that. And those are the two acronyms, Dare and Care. Hopefully, we can get those up on the screen before we leave here. But I think that's so important. If we're just kind of shifting to our personal lives and what it means to be a mother, absolutely, we've been told what it means to be a woman, right? What it means to be a mother. I think one of the worst bad agreements, which kind of started Good Mother, Bad Woman, is that we are the only ones responsible for care. Which is not true, right? We all benefit from strong male relationships, obviously, and I think men are suffering because they have also been taught, right? That it's just our job alone. But I just want to go back to something that you said that was really important. Um, Before we can approach the bad agreement, we have to acknowledge that it's there, right?
You have to define it. You have
Yeah,
to, and that's where the work that Shantae does really comes into play, because she practices mindfulness, and I am I'm a practitioner, in my
yeah,
own right and for my own life. And so that's the first thing. You have to be mindful of actually what's occurring in your life.
yeah.
And once you have a sense of what's happening around you, what your circumstances are, now we have to define what got me here, right? Because you can't
Yes.
address anything, change, or go on any type of epic journey, or plot out anything without a definition of current state. Where are you today? And that's without judgment. That's the
Right.
key to it.
Or guilt.
Because if you go into judgment, guilt, shame, and or any of that stuff at the stage where you're defining, you will get stuck there.
Correct.
This is the launch pad. So defining where I am is done without any judgment nor hesitation. Nobody's looking
Yeah.
over your shoulder. Something that you do that's introspective. This is for yourself, for you, by you, right?
Yeah. And when you're talking about business, that's one thing. When it comes to our personal belief systems, we all have this kind of inner critic, which is vicious, right? I mean, she speaks in your same voice, making you think that those are your thoughts.
Right.
And when you're, I just feel like we're going to talk about some of the bad agreements in terms of the barriers to self care, because I think as a single mom, and I know you were one at some point in your life, right? We could talk about that as well. Guilt is paralyzing, right? Um, you just feel like, well, this is my fault, my circumstances, my divorce, my bad choices,
And
so I deserve to stay here,
that's right.
right? And,
At
and
home.
there's no business, there's nothing. The kids are there, and you're like, well, this is just part of it. So I don't know. You and I can both kind of talk about how do we separate that from our identity, right? How do we separate some of these bad agreements from being what this is just who I am, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, it's not easy, right?
Yeah.
Um, really, if we take that whole concept into account that, we inherited a lot of this stuff.
I think
So
that's key. Yeah, that's first
that's the
step.
first part. That's the
Mhm.
first part because see, we like to blame ourselves for lots of things and
Right.
criticize ourselves for things we have no control over. Right? That's the
That's
very
good.
first thing. So
Release that.
just recognizing, and this is not about shifting accountability, right? For anybody
No.
that's listening, this is not, I've never been that, I ain't never been that girl to duck or dodge any form of accountability, very responsible.
Right.
But a lot of what we go through and what dictates our lived experience, we inherit it from other people. From this, starting with the skin color, starting with our racial identities, and
Yeah.
I don't want to get into a debate. We don't have time to debate, the construct of race is too big, too complex, but we live with it today. I'm Black. And I'm not just any Black. I'm dark skinned Black. I'm thick Black. I'm natural hair Black.
You
It's a little bit different, right? I'm perfect eyebrow Black. Okay.
you
And
understand.
so,
Say it
I mean, I was just gonna say the
all.
zoom
Say,
be
show them the
zooming.
profile.
But
Goldman
I
Sachs black.
digress. I
Okay.
digress. I digress.
That's
High
right. That's right.
cheekbone Black. But
Come
anyway,
on.
but all these things, from our features to our sound to our personas to the neighborhoods we're from, everything is decided for us. And so when you think about it like that, it's almost irrational
Yeah.
that we attach these things to our identity so much. We don't give ourselves a chance to be, right? We
Yep.
don't give a chance to be what God is calling, with those tugs and those things that come from the inside
Yes.
that feel innate.
Yes.
Sometimes, what about this? When your innate abilities and your innate nature starts to argue with where you came from,
Ma'am.
and you find yourself not relating to your family or the people in your hood in a certain way, and it just doesn't feel natural, right, with
Yeah.
what's coming in. So breaking bad agreements is about, like I said, slowing down enough to recognize,
Right.
who am I really? Who am I really? And just thinking about all the things that shape you and literally taking time to account for. Write it
Yeah.
out. What do I think? What do I think about being a woman? What do I think about being a Black woman? What do I think about being a Black woman from the west side of Detroit, and so on and so forth, right? All the things that make up our identities. If you just write that whole identity down and really sit with, where did this come from?
Yeah.
Part of it can I control? What part of it and how do I live into it? And really just analyzing what that whole belief system is doing for you.
No, that's
It's
really good. And one of the
powerful.
things I share on my channel is that when you do that, I'm like, pay attention to how quickly your inner critic kind of jumps in, right? Like,
Right.
even in your imagination, right? As you try to envision what a different kind of life would look like, what a different type of you would look like, right? I hear myself saying, well, no, that's not really you, or you didn't do that. I'm like, listen to this. Like, what? One of the dopest pieces of advice that I heard after my divorce, kind of like one of my lowest points in life, not because I was in love, but because I kind of lost everything, right? And I was this stigma, right? I was this single Black girl now with this child. Never was my plan, right? But people don't ask why you're a single mom. You just are now, you know? And one of the things somebody
Able.
said to me, you know what I mean? It was like Obama was getting elected that year. I was working in banking, lost my job, lost everything, had to move back home. And one of the things someone said to me was, be nice to yourself. And I think it's not a profound thing to say, super profound, but what was interesting was I heard a voice inside that immediately said no. And I was like, no. I was like, well, I can't be nice to myself. And I thought that was interesting. I thought that was interesting. That was my first opportunity to kind of really define that there was another voice inside of me, right? That good mother, bad woman is about duality, right? Two different things existing in one space, and that was not the devil, that was me, right? Of course, he'll agree and co-sign, and but I really had to
That
work
that
this
was
out.
a perfect example of an automatic thought. That happens
Yeah.
inside the mind. The
Hmm.
mind wanders and comes up with its own things. We are the first, we're the human AI,
Right,
This
right,
brain.
exactly.
We create things. We're generative. We can
Yes,
generate
that's
streams
good.
of consciousness like out of nothing, a trigger, a
Hmm.
simple trigger in your
Yes,
environment. And you had some big triggers becoming single,
divorce
getting
and yep,
divorced, losing a job, and we tie so much of our career,
we
um,
do.
and I do it now. I'm like, hi, I'm
We
Princess.
do.
I'm a global speaker. So much of my identity is wrapped up in that,
Oh,
and
yeah.
that's why I chose global speaking because I finally chose to wrap my identity around something that was innate. That's what God put in me,
That's
right?
good. That's
So
good.
I know my spiritual gifts
Yeah.
because when I start to do that analysis,
Yes.
right? When I started to do that analysis on what I believed,
Yeah.
right? So 'cause I believed a lot of things about myself, a lot of things about my identity, and especially when I got married, it meant one thing, and then I became a mother, my identity started to shift. I got divorced,
Yeah.
and you notice how I was gesturing forward, and even
Yeah.
now in my body, when I said I got divorced, I wanted to downshift.
Oh.
I just felt that. That was real time.
Oh,
I was
wow.
going here, and then I felt myself go, listen, I was like, wait, wait, nope, stop. I got divorced,
Heavy.
and
Yes.
I kept going, right? And so
Mhm.
you gotta keep on moving, but, um, so much of my
Yeah.
identity, started to shift as I started to analyze, "How did I get here? How did I come to this place? Well,
Yeah.
now what does this mean?" Right? So it's this
Yeah.
constant re-examining of ourselves, but now I learned how to do that without criticizing myself along the way, because that
Good.
will make you downshift and go back. So
I love that without criticizing. And it is. It's practice because I think for me, as I was sitting there and just like the weight of the stigma was just falling on me, all these things that I heard, right, about what it meant to be single mom, what it meant to be a black single mom. I was a statistic. I even went to my mind, I was like, I'm the girl in high school who got all the attention from the guys, and now I'm the single mom with these kids. I went through all of the inner torture, right? But the thing that helped me kind of balance it was the fact that I knew how I really got here. You know what I'm saying? Nobody was standing out on the corner, you know what I mean, in the back seat of cars. And shout out to the people who that happened to. But being able to counteract that imaginary stigma, I don't know if it's imaginary, with what actually happened kind of helped me balance and reframe and reshift, like you said. And the other thing I think you said
I
that was
wanna add this little nugget that this is
yeah,
not about pretending that, bad things don't happen, that people don't get stigmatized. That's real.
that's
People
right.
get stigmatized and
Hmm.
ostracized and, even though I hate the term blackballed, those things happen and that in the world, and it is what whips up the fear.
Right.
The thing is, did it, at the time when you were worrying about it the most, had it happened to you? It hadn't happened yet. It was all
Right.
starting to brew in your mind, and we
Yeah.
know what we orient the mind to
Right.
tends to become. It becomes how we start to move, and how we move becomes then what we start to attract, and then we start
Right.
noticing things that fit our own confirmation bias. We notice
Yeah, that's
everything
good.
that confirms what we believe. And if that
Yeah.
belief is a fear, then you're setting yourself up for a disaster.
Yeah.
So that is part of how this all works is setting your mind not to downplay or ignore things that mistakes that you might have made, but to
Yeah.
set your mind on what desired outcomes you want, where you see yourself going, to be able to really visualize that and orient yourself, orient your actions and everything that you do going forward to that point. But we take such a hard
We do.
left. We take such a hard left into Guiltville
Mentally.
that we just pull over, we blow the tires, blow the engine, the train
Beautiful, I love
shuts down, baby,
that.
we can't do anything once we get to Guiltville.
Once you
So
get the guilt, and you're right, and I think that's what this is all about too. This is just my approach to kind of duality and what you were talking about, which is failure is not a person. We've all heard that cliche, but you're
Yeah.
right. We've all made bad choices, right? They don't have to define you. You can still repackage your existence and decide where you want to go next, right? Reframe. I guess that's our word that we're all using,
Reframe.
but
You going right
we
down the DARE. Come on,
right,
keep.
right, there we go, reframe it. And just really like I'm gonna I have a funnel that I'm gonna launch, right? Kind of thought funnel of for single moms, kind of let that bottom that we all kind of reach and how we can kind of progress through the changes in our belief system. But deciding that you are worthy of something better is hard for moms. It's hard for single moms, right? And there's a statistic that says there's over 8 million households being run by single mothers in the United States alone, right? Another 2 million by single fathers. And so we're not advocating for this lifestyle
But
or
that's the
making
reality.
it's a reality. So for you to sit there and feel like, woe is me and my little mistake, honey, 8 million other women made the same mistake or had the same experience. And I just wanted to point out guilt is one thing that we say a lot, but sometimes what do you say about, in terms of breaking bad agreements when people feel that self-care is like a self-pity type of thing, right? This might be a single mom thing, it might be a black woman thing, it might be like we identify with the fact that constant struggle, being able to endure that is what makes us strong. What do
So
you
so
think
you
about that?
just set it up perfectly, right? So the
Mhm.
entire premise behind breaking a bad agreement is that you define it, right? So
Yeah.
put it in that clear, crystal clear sentence that as a mother,
Yeah.
I have to um, I have to
Endure.
satisfy all my children's needs before I address my needs, or I have to I have to endure suffering. It's always for the benefit of the child, right?
Right.
So what's that? Give me that crystal clear
Well,
problem, that thing that we believe.
yeah.
What is that statement?
Is
Which
so
one?
the statement for me would be that constantly enduring just ongoing struggle is what makes me strong, right? Because if I wasn't strong enough to push through it, then
Yeah. So okay, so the idea that we in order to prove
yeah,
our mother our mothering
strength.
quality or our strength, that we
Yeah,
have to suffer to prove strength, right? Something like that. So the way I you address it is to think, okay, who taught you that? Where'd you get that from, right?
right,
Like, so
right,
where did that come from? And a lot of times, if a woman just pauses long enough to say, yeah, who taught me that? Now, in some cases, I've seen it where it was a literal, that's what my mother did, right?
right.
My mother was a single mom, or my mom was as my mama used to say, some people are married single mothers.
They sure is.
But my I saw my mom do it all. I saw my mom have it all, do it all. Or sometimes, not everybody grew up with their parents. Sometimes it was an image of what they saw on television, right? What they
Yeah,
heard from in lore or storytelling, right? About who we were supposed to be. And so when you really just sit with, where did my construct of a mother come from?
write it
Where
down.
did that come from? And so you just kind of write that down and just sit with that for a second. And
Yeah,
then when you start to really analyze it, just think about, okay, that wherever I got this, let's say I got it from my mother, or I'll just actually use my grandmother as a real
yeah.
central part in it,
Mm-hmm.
because I was born to a teen mom. So my mom was 15 when she was pregnant, and had just turned 16 when I was born. And so she was, and it still is, she's still with us. But my mother, at the time, I mean, she was very young, still in high school and all those things. In a lot of ways, she was still growing up.
Yeah.
But the one thing that I will always say is my mother's claim to fame is that she grew up fast so I can grow up slowly. Um,
Oh,
I had a very slow childhood, and to the
that's
extent
dope.
that it got accelerated, it was because I was out here doing what I was trying to
All
do.
year now.
So it was me that was pushing the gas on life. It was not my mother. My mother, she made a lot of sacrifices for me to grow up very, very slowly.
That's dope.
But this idea, my idea that I had to do it all, came from seeing her do it all, and then literally seeing and hearing my grandmother standing over her dictating that she had to make these sacrifices, that she couldn't go certain places, that she did have a child now, right? So she was reinforced that she
Yes, yeah.
do it on her own. And here's the irony of it. As my grandmother was reinforcing to my mother that this is your baby and you got to do this and you got to do that. My mother is the youngest of 8.
Oh,
My mother
wow.
had 7 older siblings, 4 of
Wow.
whom, so 7 older siblings, 4 of whom were sisters that
Mm,
were all mothers, right?
mm,
Significantly older than she was. My mother had 3 brothers who were all big, strong protectors. She
mm.
lived in a house. We lived in a cute house too with French doors with her mama that and had a loving. My grandfather passed away. My mom was pretty young. She was still in high school when he passed away, but
Mm,
she had a father, right? He wasn't physically in the home, but she had a father. And here my grandmother was telling her, this child is your responsibility and yours only,
mm.
putting all this stress on her. And my mother was raised in a village.
That's
And
so
so
interesting.
in spite of
Yep.
her village, my mother did still take real strong ownership of, I got to do this by myself. And
Hmm.
so even in spite of my much slower upbringing and not becoming a mom until I was 31, I still came in the game like
I see.
scrambling. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? So that's my analysis. I had to
Yeah.
break it down. Why do I move the way I move with my children? And it was modeled for me.
I
My
see.
circumstance, but then did that even make sense? Why was I moving like my 16-year-old mother? I was 31,
Mm.
college educated, grad school, master's
Right.
degree holding, married at the time, in a home that I owned. My circumstance was nothing like hers. Why did I feel the need to move like her? That is
Yes.
analysis, comparison. What? It didn't make sense.
Absolutely. And being able to do that almost on a daily basis, right? People, you never have arrived emotionally, right?
True.
You never have. And I think that's what I was trying to allude to earlier. So you're
Still
absolutely
true.
right. Like after the first baby, you're somebody different. After the second baby, you're even, more different. And
Every time.
every 10 years, your husband changes, you change. And so evaluating your agreements, right, is an ongoing thing. And then too, if you were going to reframe, you talked about, bringing more characters into your story and how did you have these belief systems in the first place. If it were you, we're all moms now too. And if our kids, had kids and while they were in high school, we would feel a certain type of way. You know, was that mothering advice? Was it out of anger? Was it out of embarrassment on her part? You don't know why grandma, did to her
Right.
child what she thought was right. And so just being able to just consider, right,
And you
why
know what
you
that is?
adopted.
That kind of jumps over into the realm of care in that
Hmm.
accepting
Yes.
people where they are in life.
Yes.
You just hit the nail on the head.
Yes.
When you really define these things for yourself and get that
Yeah.
analysis going for yourself, you start to realize that the people who were modeling things towards you, you got to accept them where they were. My grandmother had 8 children by the time she was 30.
Wow, mama.
She was born in, and this is interesting, especially for her time. My grandmother was an only child, which is very uncommon for her time. But she
Yeah.
had 8 children with 4 different men. With 4
See?
different That was
Wow.
very uncommon for her time, and she had 8 children. She was born in 1933. My mother, her 8th child, was born in 1963. So
Wow.
that's the
Yeah.
math.
See?
And so that advice was coming from her lived experience, her point of reference that you got to do this all because she did it all.
Yeah.
And she put that on her child, and her child put it on me.
Mhm,
And that's
mhm.
what we do. So we got to be careful about what we're passing down. But that all of that requires you to
Yeah.
just, and that's
Right.
where care, we can circle back to this idea and this concept of self-care.
Yeah.
Self-care has many, many benefits, and self-care doesn't have to be self-derived. Other people can care for you
Oh,
as a form
absolutely.
of self-care because
And
you can invite them in.
I didn't mean to cut you off. I just want to stay there because self-care or setting boundaries for yourself, self-care involves protecting yourself, right? It involves protecting your space. I think that's so important to do or to demonstrate to our kids, especially our daughters, not even especially, but I have daughters, you have sons, so that we don't pass. these beliefs on without tools for how to address it, right? I
Oh
don't
yeah.
know how our kids are gonna process me as a mom. I'm sure they're gonna play it all back and tell me what I did wrong or what else I could have done better. But if I can at least demonstrate me reevaluating and reframing why I think this way. I apologize to them when it's warranted. Explain to the older kids where mommy is at, just so they can see that's okay to do. You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
think that's a huge thing, a huge step
I feel
in the
like,
process.
as a people, I mean, just speaking, I know this is a wide audience that you're
Okay.
in, but speaking just from my lived experience as a Black woman, I
Yeah,
know that we just, um,
we
you
don't
know,
do this.
we just are like, we're not doing that. Like, we will just like, we gotta double down on a belief system. So anyway,
Yes.
you
And don't
know,
even talk about it. Right. But if you can
we
at
don't want to talk
least,
about it. But I know
right,
I do feel like our generation
it's
of
better.
Black women, we have really come face to face with our trauma, and we really have come face to face with our triggers. And I feel like women our age, in the 40s range,
That's
we're like
it.
leading the wave of like,
Yeah.
y'all, we going to therapy.
You
We're like
understand?
leading the wave, like grab your best white girlfriend's hand and go on to therapy together with her,
Okay.
and bring your Black friends with you too. And so
Yes.
we're
Latinas.
doing that. And in us learning these tools, so that's all therapy,
Yes.
right? You're not going to get
Right.
fixed or healed and all that. There's no healing. Jesus heals, okay? Like that part. Like there's, man is not
Living
responsible
better.
for healing, but what we can do, what man is very, very equipped to do, is create tools and
Yes.
strategies and methods. And that's what you go to counseling for. You go to learn, and then we come back and we are that first generation that is like playing this out in real time on our kids. We're trying these things. Some of it goes great, some of it doesn't. But those we're trying to reshape our agreements. And so we have this new agreement that, hey, I tell my sons when I notice them getting upset, I don't say that whole, shut up and stay in the child's place. I ask them, what's up?
Right.
And my son told me the other day, like, it's you. And I said, okay. And I said,
Explain.
explain how so. And we can stop the story right there. I would have never been afforded that opportunity
Never,
ever. So we're already
ever.
breaking a
Yeah.
bad agreement and a cycle because, and again, people say, some people listen to this will say, because you turned out just fine. Yeah, I did. And I turned out just fine for a girl who was raised in the 80s. It ain't the
Right.
80s.
But some of how you turned out is in contrast to what happened to you.
In
You
contrast to
you
what
know what
happened,
I
I had to learn a lot of things. And so,
Me too. Me
um,
too. Me too.
right. And that's what everybody does. Everybody. Our parents did it. We're doing some things that our children will unlearn one day.
Or
And
learn
they will
new
continue to
something.
be better. But we are parenting from a different lens. We're parenting for a different time. There's a lot going on
Yes.
with children. And this the one thing that I know your eldest child and my eldest child are really close in age. And they're so cute. And I was just thinking about them when I just had a flashback from when they were little. They were
They
so
were
cute.
babies.
They're super
Kindergarten, preschool.
teens. Yeah, they went to preschool together. And but anyway, I was thinking about the national statistic that
Mhm.
the second highest cause of death for children ages 10 to 14 is suicide, second leading
Right.
cause. And so
Yeah.
this horrific thing that is part of our society was not the case when
Yeah.
we were being raised. So our agreements have to change
That's good.
because the world is shifting, times have changed, and there are new tools and resources that we have to avail ourselves. And so we got to move on, right? And that's what I
Yeah.
feel like our parenting. We're not, it's not that, oh, we're so much better than our parents.
No, no,
We're trying
no.
to blow up everything that they did. What we're saying is we have availed ourselves to different tools, and
Yeah.
we're going to use them, and that's
And we're
it.
going to use them. And I think that's so fair because you're right. I mean, we're both spiritual people, so we know it's different devils for different seasons, right? We didn't have it
Right.
there then, but we had our own thing, drugs and all this stuff.
Right. We got
But
issues.
and with the suicide thing, the crazy. aspect of living life differently for our kids is that they don't appreciate what they have, right? We didn't appreciate what we have. We didn't know, we couldn't really appreciate the fact that we could just go to whatever water fountain we wanted to go to. We won't even go to water fountains. You know what I mean? We don't have that frame of reference. And so for our kids, this might be digressing a little bit, but this is that whole I'm in my feelings generation, and they love it. And they're very much much more equipped than we were, I think, just in talking to each other. But it's always on this, right? They lose that face to face. And so we were very independent, but not really, right? We were outside together. We were, I don't know, just interacting in a different way. And so I think teaching our kids, this is just for the moms who are struggling with gentle parenting, which I'm not a huge advocate of. I think it's emotionally abusive a little bit for moms. I got another podcast about that. You can look at it.
Just a
But
little bit. She
you
from the
know what
Snatch
I'm saying?
Kid
Like,
tribe. Snatch a Kid tribe.
like snatch your kids. Okay. You can ask your kids, please explain to me what mommy did, but say it in the right way. Okay, make sure you still
Snatch.
approach this ain't your time to go in the bathroom and cuss how they got them kids on TikTok doing
Yeah,
it.
no, that ain't
You
never going on in my house.
you understand, but there's still a way to do it. It's just not. I think that's what I was just trying to say. Like, there's still,
Yes.
talk to me as still I'm your mom, but you have this opportunity to say something, which I didn't have to say.
Right. A new
But I
form of
still
just
don't.
a new agreement that you've created in your household. That's all.
Absolutely. And I don't allow my daughter, if she's emotional and she's spiraling, like everything she's saying is not making sense. Okay, you said your 2 points. Now stop and listen. Let me redirect you. But no, I love that. I love demonstrating certain behaviors, self-care for yourself. They learn by watching us, right? Your sons
They
will learn
do.
to do that, give their wives and girlfriends space to kind of think and come back, and hopefully they'll learn to do the same thing and come back. You don't always have to speak your mind just because you feel it right in the moment. And then we were talking about, oh, okay, so talking about therapy, talking about, I've talked about this before, how we all have like physical needs, right, of eating. You have emotional needs that are very important, and this kind of goes back to defining your emotional needs as a need, right?
Mhm.
If we don't eat, I think one of my therapists was like, she's like, if you don't eat food, you start to get hangry at first. She's like, how long would it be before you start stealing food? How long would it be before you start grabbing food out of the garbage, right? Kind of this kind of progression of this need that is going unmet. It does not go away, right?
Yeah.
Emotional needs are the same way. If we don't get what we need emotionally, how soon before, I'm going to say, you get angry, how soon before you start hanging around the emotional garbage can of alcohol, weed, drugs, start meeting people there, trauma bonding, you know what I mean?
Right. Turns
Um,
into a real spiral. So that it just goes back to your central point is that, it sounds like, I mean, we can't afford to have a negative connotation of self-care.
we can't.
And what I used to always say, just real simply, I remember, becoming a mother, and I was balancing a corporate career, of a marriage that was failing, and that was going down real fast. I had my first relationship was a 10-year relationship where we had a child at the end. My
Oh,
second
wow.
relationship was, or is still going, but a 10-year relationship that started with a baby,
Yeah.
right? So my kids are only 23 months apart,
Lord
you know,
Jesus.
but
Yep.
we're a blended family, right? So I had a lot to manage. But, from the very beginning, though, I started socializing my babies on my self-care. And I and I
Good.
I was nursing. So it put a lot of work on me, but the work was worth it. And so I used to, pump to express my milk, and do all the things to make sure they had, milk for the weekend. But, from the time my children were about 9 months, um,
Hmm.
I was going away for the weekend, at least once every 6 weeks. I
For
would
work,
no, for
for
pleasure,
yourself.
play, just for
Girl, you
myself,
better.
just to be
Yes.
away. I had friends, I had a lot of friends in Chicago, which I know you're very familiar with, because I
Yes,
went to
yes.
school for undergrad in Illinois. So I had a
I know
lot of
that.
friends in Chicago. So Chicago became, it was really integral for my self-care, because It was far enough to be like noticeably gone, but not so far that I
Yeah.
couldn't get home in case of an emergency. So, 40-minute flight,
Mhm.
3.5, 4 hour car ride away if I needed to quickly get back to my children. So
Mhm.
actually one way to sort of reframe and break the bad agreement that, oh, I have this baby now or these children and I can't go anywhere. Well, you might just go to the neighboring state or a city, a few cities over. But
Yes.
the point is, I socialize my children from the
Good.
very beginning on. I will be back, but I always left my children with a promise that I will be back and I will be back better.
Ah,
Promise you.
good.
So so I would go and they would be, oh, mommy, we want to go. And I said, well, wait a second, I'm coming back better. And they know. And it's not about, I didn't bring gifts every time, but
Good.
I came back with a sense of renewal, of
Yes.
refreshment. I was recentered. I never walk in the house complaining about what was or wasn't clean or pick up the toy. I never walked in, even sometimes coming back, I might have had a terrible trip while I was gone. I still made sure that when I walked back into the house,
Yeah.
I was refreshed because they gave me that opportunity. And
That's
after a
dope.
while, it became guilt-free. It can
Yes.
100%. By the time they were 2, they didn't even cry. I mean, these boys love me, okay?
They do,
Um, they
girl.
do, they do. They love me.
Yes.
And even now when I leave, they're like, "Oh, you're going to, you're going somewhere." I was just in New York, and before that I was in Aruba and I was gone. And they're like, and I say, "Yeah, you're gonna miss me." And they're like, "Well, we'll miss you, but we know you're coming back.
Praise God.
We know you're coming back better." So
Yeah.
what we've created in my
Oh, I
self-care, in
love
my
it.
home, we've created a belief system
I love it.
that if mom is allowed to go, she is going to come back. Hey, she's coming back and she's going to be better and she's going to be refreshed. She's going to be light. And then that'll also recalibrate maybe some of the dust ups that we've had, with all
Mm-hmm.
that gonna come back. And
I love that.
that just has been socialized in my house. And we
That is
create
so beautiful. Y'all got a whole tagline, like you.
that's
And
it.
I was gonna ask you, you kind of addressed it a little bit, like kind of the mommy guilt. The fact that you did it is part of the task, but the fact that you may have still felt the guilt is also part of what you still went, right? You still did
Yeah.
it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a whole human being. I mean, we
Yeah.
do. Even, I mean, yesterday, honestly, I was every time I get on the plane to go anywhere, and I don't know why I'm so paranoid about flying when the statistics are really not in my favor for driving, right?
You
I'm a
know
risk
what?
taker, so I go back to the statistics and all those things. I jump in the car all the time to go, but there's something that comes over me when I have to fly without my
Yeah.
children where I get very quiet on the plane. I usually don't do anything on the plane but sit still, and I'm not afraid to fly, but I'm very, very still because I'm praying that
Yes, God.
let this plane land. Let me get my things and drive home safely. And just, I don't know if it's gonna end the next day, if I'm gonna get hit by a bus the next day. Just let them see me
Yeah.
after this trip, because
Right.
I never want my children to feel like it's a new agreement for me that I
You
broke the
said,
agreement. I said I was leaving. Mommy gonna be back and I'm gonna go party. I'm gonna turn up, but I'm coming back. And that's become a new agreement for me. And that is completely outside of my control. It's not something I'm ever gonna be able to control, but that's what I'm sticking to, right? It's
no,
better
that's good.
than for me, because that's
Yeah.
what making agreements are about, doing something that's in your favor. It's better than I can't ever sacrifice and be away from my children. I got to go to every
Right.
soccer game. I don't go to every game. I don't go to every concert. That's what a daddy is for. That's like, I mean, I got 2 ears so I can listen double. They got 2 parents so somebody else can be at some of that stuff. I don't got time. And so, but I make
Right.
time for the things that are really important. And I ask my children, okay, you got 12 games this season.
That part.
Which ones, are super important? Let's look at when you're taking the pictures. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
it's parent night. Okay, wait a second. The parents got to sign up to bring Gatorade for a couple nights. Okay, I'm down for 2 nights. Okay, now, bruh, one of these games or two of these games I'm going to miss. Because something will happen, for my business, work, whatever. Something's gonna happen. And then another time, I'm just gonna be on one of my missions and I'm just not gonna
Not
come.
coming.
And you need to understand that everybody can't make it to everything. And that even though you're the apple of my eye, baby, you're not the center of the universe. And
You
so mama's just not gonna be at everything. I'm one human and I got a lot of things to do.
You
And
got a lot of things to do. I'm sorry to cut you off. And I just want to reframe that for all the single moms out there who don't have the dad or whatever. That is still true in our lives. You know what I mean? I love the family meeting. I learned that from working for Felicia Fields. I was at Ford. She was one of the super execs, right? She told me the same thing. She's like, as a super exec, I have to decide as a family meeting, what are we going to go to? What is important? So as a single mom, you can still do that. My oldest daughter, 14, I think we got 7 and 6. And it's hard when you have that age gap. They don't all want to go to the same events. And so I still have to do that with them. Like, hey, listen, what is the most important that you need me to go to? Because I'm not going to sit here and enjoy your gymnastics tournament with my toddlers running around, acting crazy. So you can still do that regardless of your family structure. So I think that's dope.
thank you. And
Yeah.
thank you for bringing me back to that central point of,
Hmm.
obviously everybody, doesn't have a supportive,
Yeah.
co-parent or a husband or that sort of thing. And just this idea though, that in you becoming the risk manager in your life, the problem solver and leading in your life, you don't have that. We have to then go build what
Yeah.
we don't have, right?
Exactly.
Because still, it is a horrible, horrible bad agreement to say that because I'm a single mom, that means I'm a singular parent,
Ma'am, you are not.
Single.
You still
Single is just like that's a legal status. That's a
right.
legal status.
That's good.
My
That's
mom was
good.
a single mom, but I had a whole, like I said, I had a village that was bigger
Right.
than she acknowledged sometimes, and even bigger than what she used and availed herself to sometimes.
Yeah.
But it was there. And to the
Ooh,
extent
that's
that it
good.
wasn't there, it was a result of her own relationships. And so you got to go in and decide if you don't have the partner that made that baby with
Right.
you, that you are going to get some partners because some
Yeah.
stuff just doesn't change under the sun. It still takes a village to raise a child. If you got more than one, then you need a village, a tribe, the neighboring city,
For each
everybody.
child.
You need a lot of people, to get in and get involved
Yeah.
with your children, people that you trust, obviously. But
Yeah.
that becomes the mission. The time that you would spend sitting in your sorrows, guilting yourself,
Right.
neglecting your self-care, you could actually be using all that time. Honestly, if you're going to use it anyway, use that time to actually build a bridge and build relationships with people
Yes.
that you can trust so that you can then create that. You might not have it this year. Like none of this, nothing about this podcast and this talk is fake. We dealing in
No.
real time, real
Real
life.
time.
Sometimes stuff is messed up in the moment and you got to dig yourself out of that. Well, the easiest way to start to really, really dig yourself out of a situation is I follow this, this script that I begin with an acknowledgement, right? I just
Hmm.
understand where I am. So I acknowledge things. Then
Hmm.
I decide and I articulate what I want. Just I say it. I say it. Then I create affirmations around it. Then I build my affiliations. I wrap my relationships and wrap my affiliations around it. Then I
Yeah.
give all of that my attention. Okay. And I start
Hmm.
to apply my attention to it. And
Yep.
those things that I apply my affiliations, affirmations, and attention start
Mm.
to become a reflection of my actions. Okay. And that is
Yeah.
how stuff gets done. When you
It
are
is.
action oriented, moving forward, right? Get the analogy.
Hmm. Yep.
Moving forward,
I'll
not
start doing it
falling
now.
back. We're going forward. When you have that type of momentum from the acknowledgments all the way through what comes in your mouth, who you
Yeah.
connect with, and all the actions that go forward, then you become an unstoppable force. Then, self-care
Yeah.
becomes a part of the process.
You don't
It
even know
doesn't
you're
even
doing it.
become this thing that we got to keep talking about. Just go do it.
Just go do
Quit
it.
playing with it, but
Because
go
didn't
do it.
nobody die if they didn't show up to whatever game. You
Ain't
still
nobody
won.
out
You
there.
still did.
But you for real could die if you don't take that self-care. Like that part.
Right. And die. I mean, even like I talk about on my podcast, me, the what do you call it? The emotional garbage can for me was alcohol, right? For me, not getting the relaxation that I wanted, I was going to whiskey for that type of comfort. And so, who I was kind of pretending to be on the outside, this good mother, this super nurturing, that distance to who I really was, right? If you really saw what I was doing behind closed doors, was great. And it's kind of like I make the example of like somebody pulling both your arms. That hurts, right? That's painful. And so I'm taking
Torturous.
the alcohol to numb that, right? And so we don't want to live our lives numb, moms, single moms, married moms, all of those things. You've given us some amazing tips with the acronyms. I'm definitely going to put your information down at the link below so you can check out Princess's YouTube and hear more about her. She's an amazing speaker and she kind of blesses us her knowledge and her advice. And it was so good to kind of hear this kind of mom side of you, sis, on the channel and hear those
Of
inner
course.
home agreements.
For real. I mean, and that's my whole life now is
Yeah.
honestly focused on making better agreements
Yeah.
for my children, showing them how to create their own. I got men growing up over here.
You sure
I'm
do,
raising
honey.
I'm raising men, and they have a
Yes.
different calling and a different set of responsibilities. And there are some agreements I will continue to heap on them, right?
You
There
have
are some
to.
things that you have to. And so
Mhm.
really all of this is just about really defining who you are, what you
Yeah,
believe in, what is going to serve you very, very well, analyzing the impact, the actual impact
yeah.
of whatever you've been believing up to this point, and then making a decision about whether you're going to keep it, whether it's serving you well, or you're going to start to make these changes, wrapping some actions around how you change, right?
Yeah.
That could be therapy, it could be a friend, a buddy system, it could be lots of things, right? It could be drawing closer to God, certainly, and reframing that challenge, those challenges into the greatest opportunities of your life. And then you just from there, says you embark on it. You just go. You
You just
go.
go. You
That's
gotta
the
get out the living room and do it, sis. So y'all can't just stay in the house and say, I don't know how it's gonna happen. You gotta make it happen. You've been given a ton of advice today. You know you're not the only one in your situation. If you're feeling kind of stuck, we have all been there. Baby steps every day. And if you mess up, start again. Don't give up. I'm new to the if you do a little bit every day, you come so much farther than not doing anything at all,
absolutely.
which has also been my story. Girl, thank you so much for being with us. We're going to put your information down in the chat. We'll talk to you guys later. Thank you.